"Sir, step away from the tent." That's how the night started. 2 police officers, flashlights blinding my eyes, treating me like I'd set up some outlaw campsite in the middle of suburbia. Their cruiser lights pulsed against the calm ripples of my lake, turning the water into a carnival of red and blue. Behind them, I spotted her Linda, the HOA president, standing smugly on the gravel path like she'd just won a neighborhood raffle for Best Citizen Snitch. Now, if you're imagining me trespassing, let me clear the record. This wasn't the public park. This wasn't community property. This was my ranch, my lake, my land. I'd paid taxes on it for years, and no line in the HOA bylaws gave them even a square foot of it. But Linda, in her infinite wisdom, had apparently called 911 to report an illegal squatter camping on what she told dispatch was community-maintained recreational space. The officers didn't know what to believe. From their perspective, it looked like a weekend fisherman had just plopped down a lawn chair, pitched a tent, and cracked open a cooler on some shared neighborhood pond. Linda was gesturing wildly, pointing at me like I was a burglar caught mid-break-in. And I'll admit, there was something absurdly dramatic about the scene, my campfire still smoldering, the smell of charred marshmallows in the air, my golden retriever snoring happily beside the tent flap while I tried to explain property law under police interrogation. Of course, none of this started that night. The battle with Linda had been brewing for months, and it smelled exactly like her lavender-scented HOA letters, the ones she hand-delivered in thick envelopes that looked more like jury summons than neighborly reminders. The first came in spring, a warning that my outbuildings needed HOA architectural approval. Translation: she'd noticed I was building a small dock at the edge of my lake and decided to insert herself. I sent her the county permit, stamped and approved. She sent me back a 3-page note quoting bylaws about community cohesion. The next letter accused me of creating a nuisance with unregulated watercraft. That unregulated watercraft was my kayak, which, according to her, set a precedent for unsightly storage. Then came her performance at the monthly HOA meeting. She stood at the podium with her color-coded binders, announcing that residents have expressed concern about certain property boundaries not being respected. She never said my name outright. She never had to. Everyone knew. I'd laughed it off at first. But laughter has a shelf life when someone keeps rewriting your reality. And Linda was relentless. That night at the lake, I had decided to make a point. I hauled out the biggest tent I owned, pitched it right on the shoreline, and lit a fire. My plan wasn't grand revenge, just a quiet evening under the stars, a way of reclaiming space she'd tried to snatch with paperwork and posturing. I grilled some burgers, opened a beer, and for a few golden hours forgot about HOA politics. Then came the sound of gravel crunching. A flashlight beam swept across the water, and there she was. Arms folded, lips pursed so tight they could have cracked a walnut. "You can't be here," she hissed. "Linda," I said evenly, "this is my ranch. My name is on the deed. You can check the county records if you're bored." Her eyes glittered with something between fury and glee. "Not according to our maps." "Our maps?" I repeated. That was a new one. She whipped out a folded piece of paper like she'd been waiting for this performance all night. It wasn't a survey. It wasn't even a plat. It was a printout from Google Maps with a red circle drawn around the lake in gel pen. "Community Lake," she declared, tapping it. "It says so right here." I laughed, maybe too loud. "Linda, Google Maps once told me the McDonald's drive-thru was a hospital. It's not a legal document." That's when she dialed 911, right in front of me. "Yes, officers. I'd like to report a trespasser. He's camping illegally on our HOA's recreational land." 10 minutes later, red and blue lights turned my peaceful lakeside into a circus. The officers were professional, but skeptical. "Sir, the HOA president here says this is community property. Do you have proof otherwise?" I gestured toward the cabin up the hill. "The deed's framed in my office. You're welcome to come see it." Linda scoffed, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear. Of course he'd claim that. Squatters always do. That was the moment something shifted. The officers exchanged a glance, suddenly less convinced by Linda's certainty. One asked her, "Ma'am, do you have documentation that shows this is community property?" Her jaw tightened. "I don't need documentation. I'm the president of the HOA." Silence hung heavy. The fire crackled, my dog stretched, the lake lapped gently at the shore. And there she stood, queen of a kingdom she didn't own, insisting that her title carried more weight than a deed recorded at the county courthouse. The officers didn't arrest me. They didn't arrest her. They told us both to sort it out civilly and left, though not before giving Linda a look that said they weren't entirely buying her story. She slunk away, but not before hissing, "This isn't over." I watched her retreat, her silhouette shrinking into the darkness, and I knew she wasn't bluffing. If she was bold enough to call 911 on me at my own lake, what else was she willing to fabricate? I doused the fire, zipped the tent, and tried to sleep. But my mind was racing. Linda had just declared war, and tomorrow she'd bring maps, binders, and every ounce of suburban theatrics she could muster. And if I knew Linda, she wouldn't just be trespassing on my land, she'd be trespassing on the truth itself. Google Maps says otherwise. That's what Linda shrieked across the cul-de-sac as I unrolled the official county survey on the hood of my truck. The paper snapped in the breeze, a crisp black-and-white record with surveyor stamps and signatures legal proof as old as the oak trees around my lake. Linda jabbed her finger at me like she was testifying before Congress, waving a blurry printout of a satellite image as if it held more authority than the county clerk's seal. The neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, whispering, eyes darting between my survey and Linda's ink-stained map. It was absurd, but also frightening. Because here was the realization. Linda wasn't just mistaken or overzealous or trying to clarify boundaries. She was deliberately constructing her own version of reality, brick by brick, until one day everyone in this neighborhood might just believe her. And once they believed her, she'd own not just the bylaws, but the land itself. Now, the thing about Linda is, she doesn't operate in half measures. When she decides on a crusade, she straps on her metaphorical badge and starts patrolling like a sheriff in a town no one asked her to protect. I first heard about her border patrol walks from my neighbor Mark, who stopped by one Saturday while I was pressure washing the dock. "You know, she's been putting up signs, right?" he said casually, like he was mentioning a yard sale. "What kind of signs?" I asked, lowering the sprayer. Mark smirked. "Ones that say HOA property, no trespassing. She nailed one to that old cedar tree near your south fence line. Then she told my kids they couldn't fish on your lake without a permit." A hollow laugh escaped me. "A permit from who, exactly?" "Her?" Mark shrugged. "That's what she told them. You're dealing with Sheriff Linda now." Sure enough, a walk around the perimeter proved him right. Cheap aluminum signs with bold black letters, the kind you buy in a pack of 4 from Home Depot, had been planted like flags around my land. A couple were even zip-tied to posts that weren't hers. One leaned at an awkward angle, already rusting at the corners. But they weren't the signs themselves that rattled me. It was the confidence with which she placed them, like she'd already rewritten the lines of the map in her head. The HOA meeting that month turned into theater. Linda stood up in front of the room, hair shellacked in hairspray, binder tabs color-coded like a general's war map. She projected a grainy screenshot of my lake onto the screen, a red oval scrawled over it with the words, "Community Recreational Zone." I raised my hand, the survey folded neatly in my lap. "Linda, that's not what the county says. I have the deed, the plat, the legal description. You're misrepresenting facts." Her eyes narrowed, her smile tight. "Mr. Andrews, just because you claim something doesn't make it true. Our residents rely on modern tools, Google Maps, public directories, community consensus. These outdated documents you keep waving around, well, they don't reflect the needs of the present." There was a murmur in the room, and that's when it hit me. She wasn't even trying to prove she was right. She was trying to prove I was obsolete. My deed, my survey, my evidence. Those were relics in her eyes, and she was banking on neighbors being more impressed by digital lines on a free website than by a stamped county record. After the meeting, I overheard two board members whispering about future amenities and shared access points. That's when my stomach dropped. This wasn't about a sign or a kayak. Linda was laying groundwork for something bigger, an annexation of sorts where she'd fold my lake into the HOA's portfolio like it had been theirs all along. If she managed to get enough people on board, my ownership might not matter nearly as much as my ability to fight off the story she was spinning. The turning point came one evening when I caught her in the act. She was walking the edge of my property at dusk, clipboard in hand, muttering to herself. A new sign dangled from her grip, ready for posting. My trail camera caught the whole thing. The way she adjusted her reading glasses, hammered the post in with exaggerated effort, then scribbled notes like she was conducting an official inspection. I confronted her the next day. "Linda, you know this isn't your land. Why are you putting up signs?" She didn't flinch. "Because the community deserves clarity. People have a right to know what they can and cannot access. But you're lying to them," I said. "That's not clarity, that's fiction." Her expression didn't change. "Perception is reality, Mr. Andrews. If people see it's HOA property, they'll treat it as such, and eventually it will be." That line stuck in my head like a nail. Perception is reality. She wasn't fighting with deeds or laws. She was fighting with psychology, and in a world of neighborly rumors and Facebook posts, that might be even more dangerous. I thought about the officers by the lake, the way they'd paused when she invoked her title. I thought about the whispers at the meeting, the way board members leaned in at her every word. Slowly, terrifyingly, her fantasy map was starting to gain traction. That night, I spread the survey across my truck hood again, tracing the black boundary lines with my finger. The crisp smell of paper and ink mixed with the diesel tang of the driveway. I knew the truth was on my side, but I also knew truth alone wasn't enough. Linda had a megaphone, and I had a piece of paper. As I folded the survey back into its protective sleeve, headlights swept across the yard. A car slowed, then idled at the curb. I recognized the silhouette, Linda's SUV. She sat there for a moment, watching before rolling down her window. Her voice carried across the night air, calm but dripping with promise. "Enjoy your lake while you can." Then she drove off into the darkness, leaving me staring at the survey, realizing that the real battle wasn't just about land. It was about the story of the land, and she was determined to be the one who told it. "Community standards, my foot," Linda hissed in the trail cam audio, yanking one of my private property signs out of the ground. Freeze frame, her face caught in infrared, eyes squinting, jaw clenched. The timestamp glowed in the corner, 11:42 p.m., while her voice carried across the quiet night, muttering about protecting what's ours. It was the smoking gun, and I nearly laughed when I replayed it. The HOA president, so obsessed with her own story that she marched onto my land, in the dark, armed with a hammer and a stack of lies. When I downloaded that clip, I knew the tide had turned. For weeks, I'd been battling her with surveys and deeds. She countered with gossip and signs. But video didn't lie. It didn't care about binders or how loudly you could say community property. Getting that footage wasn't luck. After her "perception is reality" speech, I mounted trail cameras around the property line. I expected deer, maybe a teenager sneaking a swim. Instead, I got Linda in her sensible shoes, clipboard under her arm, patrolling like she owned the place. She paused at each sign, muttered, yanked it down, then scribbled notes like she was auditing the Pentagon. She even wandered near my dock, shining a flashlight on my kayak as if it were contraband. At one point, she shook her head at my dog's water bowl. "Unsanitary. Violates standards," she muttered. When I showed the clip to my neighbor Mark and his wife, their jaws dropped. "She's insane," his wife whispered. Mark just grinned. "Oh, this is going to be good." So I gathered my arsenal, The survey, my deed, screenshots of Linda's posts claiming the lake was community property, and finally the pièce de résistance, trail cam footage on a flash drive. I slid everything into a manila folder like I was prepping for court. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Word had spread, and half the neighborhood turned up. The air smelled of burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. Folding chairs creaked, and Linda stood at the front like a queen addressing her court. Crimson blazer, binder stacked with tabs, voice sharpened for a speech. "Good evening," she began, smile rehearsed. "As president, it's my duty to protect community property from misuse. Some individuals," she glanced at me, "have spread misinformation about boundaries. Rest assured, I've taken every step to defend your rights." A few neighbors nodded, others frowned. I raised my hand. "Madam President," I said evenly, "if I may, I have evidence to present." The room buzzed. Linda's smile didn't falter, but her grip tightened on the podium. "Evidence?" I walked forward, folder in hand, and laid out the documents. The stamped survey, the notarized deed, copies for every board member. "This is the legal record of my property, but I understand some of you have been shown alternative maps. So let me show you something else." I plugged in the flash drive. The projector flickered, then froze on the night vision image. Linda, hammer raised, ripping my sign from the ground. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." I hit play. Her voice filled the speakers, muttering about protecting community standards as she tucked the stolen sign under her arm. The timestamp glowed. The footage rolled. And there she was, caught in her own lie, in front of the very people she claimed to protect. Her face flushed red. She sputtered, reaching for the mic. "This is taken out of context." "Out of context?" I said. "The context is my property, at nearly midnight, with you trespassing." A board member leaned forward, frowning. "Linda, is this true?" She tried to laugh it off. "I was conducting a late inspection, ensuring compliance." But no one was buying it. Even her loyalists shifted in their seats. Mark, sitting in back, muttered just loud enough, "Looks more like a break-in than an inspection." Laughter rippled across the crowd. For the first time, Linda's authority cracked. The board shuffled papers, murmuring about liability and legal exposure. Neighbors whispered, and the weight of their stares pinned her in place. I leaned toward the mic. "Here's the deal. Linda has been trespassing, vandalizing, and misrepresenting facts. If this continues, I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action. But for now, I'll settle for the truth being acknowledged. The lake is private property. Mine. And no HOA vote or Facebook post can change that." The silence that followed was electric. Finally, a board member cleared his throat. "We'll need to review this evidence. Thank you, Mr. Andrews." Linda tried to speak again, but her voice faltered. The projector still froze her grimace behind her, a monument to her downfall. Even she seemed to realize it. The meeting adjourned in chaos. Neighbors clustered in knots, whispering, shooting her wary glances. She stormed out first, binder clutched to her chest, heels clicking like gunfire down the linoleum. But just before she shoved open the doors, she turned and looked back at me. There was no apology in her eyes, just a flicker of something colder. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. And that's when I realized Linda might have lost the room, but she hadn't lost her will. If she couldn't own the land, she might just try to destroy it.